Hello, everyone. This is Group 13. My name is Andrew,
My name is Sammy.
My name is Ty.
and we're doing document 28-3, Roe versus Wade. So you might be wondering, who are these two individuals? One of them is Jane Roe. She's the woman who brought this issue in court. She's also part of the Women's Health and Abortion Project. She supports the abortion rights. Henry Wade, Auntie Wright, is the local Texas district attorney. He supports the abortion is unconstitutional. So summary of the Roe versus Wade. 1973 decision of making abortion legal and undo the state able to ban abortion. This conflicts with the 14th Amendment right to privacy because this doesn't allow women to have an abortion. On the other hand, this leads to an unwanted child to be adopted. At one point, at what point can the state rights do for the unborn child when the woman declares the right to privacy? Amicus Curiae brief in support of Jane Roe. This is a far-reaching significance because it's up to the woman whether to bear a child, and pregnancy causes unemployment. This leads to the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. This is the decision to have a child robbed. Because of bearing a child, her liberty is taken away because she has to look after the child. Men unable to see women in any role other than mother and wife. This causes physical hardship and emotional damage. Total destruction of a woman's status comes from having to take responsibility for legal abortion or bear unwanted child.
In the Amicus Curiae's brief in support of Henry Wade, they first bring up the National Right to Life Committee, which is basically an organization that informs and educates the general public on questions related to the sanctity of human life. They bring up how one of the committee's concern is protecting the right to life of an unborn child. They also talk about how they recognize the dignity of a mother and the rights of a father and the responsibility of society to provide support and assistance to both the mother and the child. One question that they ask is, to what extent can the state protect the right of an unborn infant to continue living despite the rights of privacy on women to decide whether or not she wants the child? They also bring up the due process clause and talks about how even unborn children have the right to not be deprived of life. In this case, the court must choose between the right of privacy of a woman with respect to the use of her body and the state's right to prevent the destruction of a human life. In the amicus brief filed by the American Association of University Women, they assert that a woman's right of reproductive anatomy was defined as a personal constitutional right of a woman to determine the number and spacing of her children. However, despite this, that right does not extend to permit the destruction of a living human being, despite not being a threat to the mother. The Supreme Court decision ends by talking about how a woman can be free to have an abortion only if that human being is regarded as part of herself. And it talks about how a woman should be left free to practice contraception, but not left free to commit feticide. So what was the court decision and how did it impact the states? In the decision, the government recognizes the consequences that would happen if they denied a pregnant woman an abortion. Such consequences would include specific and direct harm, psychological harm, or even problems bring the child into a family that is already unable to provide for the baby. However, despite this, they do not agree that a woman should be entitled to terminate her pregnancy at whatever time, in whatever way, and for whatever reason she chooses. They also recognize that the right of personal privacy includes the right to abort. However, this right is not unqualified and must be considered against important state interests. In the end, they hold that abortion is only allowed for life-saving procedures and leave states free to place increasing restrictions on abortions, which usually goes in favor of the state's interest. The final ruling is not absolute and depends on what is at stake, which is the health risk of a pregnant woman or the potential human life.
And the impact it had, the impact the ruling had on the society is that the ruling helped define decisions about a pregnancy. The rulings helped define decisions about a pregnancy belong to the woman and reserve the highest protection of that right. It also found that privacy is not absolute if the state deems it necessary to revoke privacy to save a potential life. Many state and federal laws on abortion were repealed, and it escalated an already ongoing dispute on the ethics of abortion, with people being pro-choice and pro-life, and that this dispute still goes on today. And for our discussion questions, we asked, what arguments does the court rely on in making its ruling in Roe versus Wade? And following that up, how does the court accept or reject the arguments of the amicus curiae briefs? Our second question would be, what conclusions about the political culture of the early 1970s can you draw from the evidence of the court's decision and friend of a court's briefs? How do these sources reflect a range of views?
Thank you. Thank you for listening.